So, as many of you know me, and I'd like to introduce you to Thomas Kitchen. Thomas is my dear colleague, and he's actually taking on an awful lot of the work that I'm now not doing while I run my farm and retire. And he is an inspiration, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy hearing from him and listening to him as well. Now, this is a slightly different session. First, I'm in the middle of nowhere in rural Wales, and I might lose my connection. And if so, Thomas is going to manage it all, or you might just lose my face, because we have rubbish internet in the middle of Wales. And this is partly pre-recorded and partly live. So the pre-recorded is about 40 minutes, and I'd love you to watch it all because it's beautifully recorded by some friends of mine who work for the BBC and do filming for the BBC and nature programs. So it is beautiful. And it's also got some really interesting people for you to listen to. And we want to stimulate your thinking for your next session. And we really would love you to join us in the breakout groups after. So, Thomas, is there anything else we want to say before we get going?
No, not at all. Thanks very much. And I guess we can go to the video.
Yeah, please. Can we go to the video?
Hi. So welcome to my plenary. My name is Professor Debbie Cohen, and I'm an Emeritus Professor of Occupational Medicine at Cardiff University. And what that means is I'm retired from the NHS and retired from Cardiff University. But I'm not kind of fully retired. What I do now is run this beautiful place, which is a 10-acre small holding. And what that means to my international colleagues is that it's a small farm. And it's a farm where I breed and manage rare breed animals, such as sheep and pigs and goats. And what I've also learned in my journey, in my new occupation, is how to manage the land, how to think about the land, how to build my land, which had been left barren for over 10 years, and think big about sustaining and developing both the land, the animals, and the wildlife that live within it. And it's taken me on quite a journey, and what it's made me realise is that we have to think differently in physician health. I was kind of thinking about this pre-pandemic, to be honest, but the pandemic has made me absolutely certain that we need to think differently in physician health. We need to think bigger, we need to think bold, we need to think expansive and learn from others, learn from what's been going on around us in terms of nature and developing our contacts and understanding of nature and how it impacts on our well-being, but also how we stop the detriment of our land and our wildlife with how we've been living over the last 10, 15 years. So that's what this plenary is about. It's about what I've learned on my journey. It's about me introducing you to people that you might find interesting. I hope you do, because I do. And help you to start thinking differently. Because tomorrow there's going to be a session about saying, okay, so what can and can't we do? Because at the heart of this is being bold. It's about thinking big. It's about thinking holistically, so not just about the physicians around us, not just about small interventions, but how do we build and develop our organisations, our environments, and how do we do that working with our colleagues right across medicine, nurses and other healthcare professionals, physios, anyone that you come in contact with. Because it can't just be for physicians anymore. I don't think it's sustainable. So before we head into listening to these very interesting people and start thinking ourselves about big and different and what we can do, I thought I'd give you a bit of a background as to why I've come here, why I'm feeling that this is what we need to do. And why my talk is called Resilience, Regeneration and restoration. Some of you might say that is just semantics, Debbie, and just get on with it. But I don't believe it is. I don't like the term resilience. As many of you will know if you've heard me speak before, I think it's a bit of a sticking plaster. It's a bit of a way to say it's not my problem, it's your problem because you haven't got any resilience, or the organisation just isn't resilient. They've got to get their act together. I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at things and doesn't really understand the whole perspective of what needs to happen if we want to bring about positive and sustained change. And I really quite like the word regeneration because I think, you know, that's partly what we need to do. We need to regenerate what we had and what we believed we used most succinctly within our NHS and other healthcare systems. A bit like, you know, let's regenerate our land. So that's quite interesting and an interesting way of thinking about it. But maybe it's more about restoration. And that's what I'm going to get two of my dear colleagues to talk to you about. What does restoration really mean? And how might we restore rather than regenerate? And do we want that rather than regeneration? I think these are the questions that we need to think about during this session and give some credence to in terms of their terminologies, and forget the word resilience in my opinion. But that's just my opinion, and I think you need to think about it. You might say, nope, that's what we need. But then let's be able to define it clearly. And also, you know, partly for me, it's living here, living in this most amazing environment has made me think, okay, if we know we have climate crisis now, if we know that what we're doing is losing biodiversity and that's what we need to regain, and if we're talking big about projects, you know, nationally and internationally, about rewilding, about bringing back what we had before, then why don't we think about it in those perspectives as well for our healthcare services? Even more so now since the pandemic. I mean, I was thinking about this pre-pandemic, but I think even more so now, this is something we need to do. And in a way, those working in natural environments and farming are one step ahead of us because they're already starting to think about how we're going to do that. You know, what does rewilding mean for our environment? What does biodiversity really mean? And how do we influence policy to make that happen, to bring about that change? Okay, so here's my challenge to you all. I want you to think about what gives you fire in your belly, something that really makes you think, I could do this, this can make a change, this can make a difference to my colleagues, my organisation and my patients. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to 5 really interesting and inspiring people that I've met on my journey through thinking about these issues. 4 of them are non-medics and they're from the food and farming and agriculture world. And one, Thomas Kitchen, is a medic who I work with very closely. And the reason I want you to meet them is because I think there's a lot to learn from what's happened in other industries, and particularly agriculture, given the climate change issues and crises that we have now. Because now we are in a healthcare crisis, and so we have to think differently too. And I want you to think about policy. I want you to think about big policy. How do you inform government? How could we influence government to change? How could we inform and influence our large healthcare organisations like the NHS in the UK? Because I think we can do it, and the people you're going to meet, I think, might give you that opportunity to think about how you can do it. But that's what I think we need to do next. I think we can't just say, haven't got the money, haven't got the time, haven't got the personnel. We've got to go beyond that and say, well, yeah, let's find them, let's do it, let's think about how we might achieve this. And that's what we're going to do now. Listen to these 5 people. I'm going to give you an introduction to each of them as we go along. And then you have time to think about what gives you that real fire when you listen to those guys and what you think you might be able to achieve. So come along with me with the next part of my journey, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks. Sue is the Chief Executive of the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission, an independent charity set up in 2017 by a group of leaders from businesses and NGOs, and is funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. Its mandate is to help shape a new vision for a more fair and sustainable food system, including recommendations on food, health and well-being, a farming transition to agroecology, better land use and resilient and adaptable communities, all more able to respond to future scenarios, hopefully, especially the triple challenge of the climate, nature and public health crisis.
So Debbie asked me to talk to you today about what I've learned from my experiences leading the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission and how that might translate across to the work that she does in health. And truth is, I learned a great deal from chairing a health board for 10 years in Wales and have carried that learning over to my work in the Commission. So I do think there's a lot to share between our different sectors. And perhaps actually that is the first lesson and the first way of working that we engage in. Too often policy making is located in a particular silo or sector, and so much information, so much evidence, so much research is lost through either ignoring, discounting or simply not noticing the really good work that's happening elsewhere. So with the Food, Farming Countryside Commission, we have what some people call an enormous mandate, but actually what we call working across the whole system and joining up those policy silos that otherwise are disconnected or fragmented. Convening the leadership from those different sectors has also been really, really important to us. The strength of our work comes from the credibility, the authority, the passion and commitment of those leaders in their organisations, in their sectors, who work with us, who share their experience and knowledge so very generously, and in turn then advocate for the kinds of recommendations and policies that we've been making. And we've also worked really hard to listen very carefully to those people who are sometimes called hard to reach. We prefer to say the seldom heard. We travelled the whole of the UK in developing our recommendations, on a bike, in fact, in a very kind of barefoot way, travelling out to people in communities, in villages, in farms and small businesses, and worked hard to hear their story and then tell their story. So for us, it was working with all sorts of people well beyond the usual suspects that you might expect to see in our space. Working with some humility, a real sense of curiosity, and a genuine interest in hearing from people whose voices are seldom heard in the policy debates, that really helped us write recommendations with a grounded authority and has, I think, contributed to the way that they've been received across political parties, across sectors, across organisations.
Now I want to introduce you to Dom Higgins. Dom is the Head of Health and Education at the Wildlife Trust in the UK. Prior to this, he was the Director of External Affairs for a volunteering organisation where he led the health and well-being agenda, and he led to the establishment of the Green Gym Unit, one of the original green prescriptions. Dom has also worked on conservation, climate resilience and community engagement programmes internationally.
Local wildlife trusts work in partnership alongside healthcare sector across the UK, and our programmes help the participants feel a sense of purpose, feel fulfilled. Obviously increased well-being and physical health from the activity, but it's something more than that. If you're part of an effort to restore nature and natural processes locally, you feel good about the change you're making, and practically you're making a difference to tackling nature loss and climate change. So there's a huge amount we can learn from each other. How do I see our partnerships developing between wildlife trusts and the healthcare sector? Well, there's a massive estate in the health sector. We can definitely make that more biodiverse rich and part of connecting up our green and blue spaces into a nature recovery network across the UK. That would be really exciting. I think every healthcare setting could have a complementary natural health service so that green and blue prescribing, they become the norm. But also we need to think about linking that to specific issues like eco-anxiety. There's been a brilliant programme between Lancashire Wildlife Trust and Lancashire NHS Foundation Care Trust. They've just won the Mental Health Innovation of the Year award from the Health Service Journal. And it's simply connecting local community mental health services into Wildlife Trust's core volunteering programmes. And the outcomes, the stories coming out of that are outstanding, amazing stuff. So we could do with that in every foundation.
It's really helped me to motivate myself and to give me some self-direction that I didn't have before.
If you have got mental health issues and you feel like you want to do something but scared, come and do it because it's amazing.
Wake up excited to come here because I know that I get along with everyone and we have a good time, we make a difference.
What can we offer to people and to organisations that want to make a difference to well-being? Well, I think we can offer policy change and partnerships to help us campaign for those policy changes. That's our biggest thing, I think. We want to embed nature in the healthcare system, but we also want to make it a normal part of everyday schooling. So every education setting, they learn in nature, so time spent outdoors, but learning about nature and climate change and equipping future generations for the challenges to come. So we offer opportunities to actually make a difference. So what's needed? I think the final question is to what's needed to make this happen. Well, the major thing that we could all play a part in is to have 30%, at least 30% of our land and sea to be connected together, but also to be protected for nature's recovery by the year 2030. Making more space for nature to become abundant again, it will help struggling wildlife and natural processes, but it will also have a massive impact on our well-being and providing equitable access to well-being, which is one of the biggest things we could do. 30% is the bare minimum that nature needs to start recovering. We're far short of this. So the next 10 years, I say, is a time for us all, it's a time of renewal. So we can rewild our lives and make a recovery for after COVID green and fair. So we all need nature more than ever. We've seen that. So when we do succeed in reaching 30% by the year 2030, there'll be wilder landscapes that have ecosystem services, but we will have on the doorstep nature for everybody too. And so we need everyone's support to help us succeed.
So now, let me introduce you to Kim. Kim Stoddart is a popular gardening journalist, writer and editor. She's written for publications such as the Guardian newspaper and also the medical journal The Lancet. She's the author of the Climate Change Garden book and runs resilient growing courses, which she's been doing since 2013. As well as writing, Kim runs therapeutic gardening projects with disabled adults, and she's keen to show how wildlife-friendly, organic grow your own can help build resilience and enable well-being for person, plate and planet.
Hello, my name's Kim Stoddart and I'm a gardening journalist, I'm an author, I'm an editor, and I'm helping to set up growing projects around the UK for Garden Organic. I feel very passionately about the need for people across all levels of society to have access to time to connect with the natural world. No such thing as a quick fix in society. Moving forward with everything we've been through is a time to throw things up in the air and assess how happy we all were and how healthy we were before the pandemic. To look at the way that we can move forward together in light of the challenges that we face. The opportunity to have access to grow some of your own, preferably organic food, is incredibly powerful. From a well-being perspective, it makes you feel so very good. I say I've seen this time and time again on projects that I've worked on. To actually be involved with other people, taking seed, transforming it into plants, into food to bring to the table, makes you feel so incredibly good. It's grounding, it provides emotional regulation in the extreme. For myself, as a very busy person, actually taking time out and factoring time in my day to garden, to grow food, makes me feel more productive in my work. It enables me to step away. My best ideas often come when I'm gardening, and then I can step back in. But this shouldn't just be a matter of gardening for privilege. The access, the ability to be able to grow some food should be available to people across all levels of society. And in order to do that moving forward in the future, you need to look at access through places of work, through housing communities. You need to look at the whole infrastructure and the way that we together are working. Moving forwards, post-pandemic, with all the challenges that we currently face, with the issues around climate change and concerns abound, there is so much to be had to actually just looking at everything that we've taken for granted before and assessing how we can do things better. We've been treating to a greater extent a lot of the symptoms of our, let's face it, at times very unhealthy lifestyles, and actually if we can look at weaving access to food growing into every layer of society, from the busy exec through to the person, the single parent who's struggling to put food on the table. If we can find a way to actually create spaces that are accessible to all, to encourage workplaces to engage, then we can actually help to create a greater connection. As a society, we need help stepping back tentatively into the world after all that we've been through, with this very necessary disconnect we've needed to have to keep everybody safe. But the connection of growing food, hands in the soil, providing food for the table is something that shouldn't just be available for those that have an outside space or garden. It should be made available for all, for the well-being of all, for the future of all, for the future of people, person and planet.
So now I'd like to introduce you to Rob Owen and Mim MacDonald. They run Holistic Restoration. Now, Holistic Restoration acts to reframe the relationship between people and nature. They use the latest scientific insights to illuminate our ecological roles in landscapes and support people and communities to step outside and into dynamic partnership with the wild to enhance their health and restore our world.
Holistic comes from the Greek word for whole, which is drawn from an ancient Indo-European word meaning uninjured, from which our modern-day words for health and heal also come. So embedded within our language is the concept of wholeness and health being interlinked. The ancient Greeks focused on the nature of connection between the elements of the whole, and Aristotle noticed that the whole is more than the sum of its parts, meaning the whole has properties that none of its elements in isolation possess. Jan Smuts gave us the term holism in 1926, which he used to draw attention to nature being formed of wholes on all scales, with one whole being formed from smaller wholes and also contributing to the formation of larger wholes. The word holistic, then, brings with it an understanding of the interconnectedness of the world, and that it's this connectivity that is system health. The word restoration comes from the Latin of to make firm, to build up, or to repair, and recalls some of what holistic brings, working from an assumption of the existence of a whole that can be complete and uninjured in the first place. The re part of restoration reminds us of the passage of time. Re generally denotes the reconstruction of something and stands in opposition to de, which denotes the deconstruction of something. Both highlight ongoing processes of the building or unpicking of wholes. Restoration, then, reminds us that the various wholes aren't stationary things, but are processes moving in directions, often set in motion long ago. Holistic restoration as a whole means to foster connection and communication between everything and to focus on our ability to facilitate the emergence of new and uninjured wholes.
Hi, I'm Rob, and I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about what this means in practice and what it means to create a whole. I'm going to do this by covering 4 points, each of which is what we see as key to holistic restoration and might be interesting to a healthcare setting. So the first of these steps is to step back. Try to relinquish yourself from the deep set beliefs of how a system should behave or how it should look. And in doing so, this allows you both to think about your systems in a totally new way, but also observe systems in a new way without the past lenses of your deep set belief. The second point I wanted to share with you guys is the idea about placing your system within the larger systems around it and thinking about the smaller systems that comprise your system. So in a healthcare setting, this might be thinking about how does my healthcare system change the way that society thinks about health? And what does society think about my healthcare system? When thinking about the smaller systems that comprise yours, you might imagine the care systems, the cleaning systems, scheduling systems. An interesting thing about these is they both create the landscape that surrounds them, but that landscape sculpts them. There's this co-evolution going on, and you can see this is quite similar to the idea of how a grazer creates the grassland in which it lives. The third point that I wanted to share with you guys is the idea of fostering connectivity and acknowledging interdependence. So this is what sets apart just a collection of parts from a system. So if you think about in a healthcare system, you'll find connectivity and interdependence between roles. You might find them within a role, or you might find between the whole system and the rest of society. And it's really the nature and the quality of these connections which dictates what system emerges from them. The final point I wanted to share with you guys is thinking about treating problems at their source. It's so easy when designing interventions in complex systems to create superficial solutions to these very complex issues. So in a farm, that might be applying nitrogen to your fields which you've malnourished because of your farming practices. Or some might say they're delivering resilience training to doctors working in a health system which perpetuates poor well-being. But whatever it is, it's important to follow the feedbacks to the root cause of these problems and create interventions on them. And you'll often find you can create multiple benefits from one intervention while doing this. So I'm going way over time. So I'm going to say goodbye. Enjoy your conference. And thank you for listening to about creating wholes or holistic restoration.
Now let me introduce you to Thomas Kitchen. Thomas is a consultant anaesthetist and the Deputy Director for HHP Wales. This is the government-funded service in Wales for all of healthcare to support them with their psychological needs. He also teaches the medical students about developing emotional skills and strategies, and talks widely on both subjects. So, Thomas, thank you.
Hi everyone, how are you? It was once said that the NHS could be likened to an oil tanker, a vessel of such large proportions and complexity that it would take such a huge amount of effort or such a very long time to make even the smallest change to its course. Some said that the NHS was even more resistant to change than an oil tanker, or that it simply couldn't change, or if you tried to measure that change day by day, then you just couldn't see it. Now, it has taken a huge amount of effort, but it has changed, hasn't it? Over the last year, we've seen, we've done, we've witnessed, we've observed things that we felt previously were impossible become possible. COVID-19 may have turned our world upside down, but at the same time, it has liberated the potential for change, for things that we felt would be impossible to become a new reality. The expansion of digital health, for example, the normalisation of a virtual working environment, the recognition and the focus on staff funding, the transformation of infrastructure, a move to more sustainable and efficient mechanisms of drug delivery in diabetes or substance misuse, the complete restructuring of medical rotas, and a massive uplift and a focus on the importance of staff well-being and psychological health. Recognising an opportunity in this particular area, we were able to lead by expanding our existing physician health programme to offer its services to all NHS workers in Wales. Every single person working in healthcare, no matter what their role, recognising that we all work as part of a team. When we think about these things, those things that felt hard to achieve or perhaps impossible before COVID, what we have seen is that these things are possible. And I wonder, what comes to your mind when we start to think about this? What comes to your mind when you think about the place where you're working? Now, of course, there is a cost, isn't there? Definitely financial. For some physical, for many political, and for probably everybody in some level emotional. We all have our own stories to tell. But let's just take a look back for a moment and remember that out of the calamity of the world being at war came the desire to create a national health service in the UK, to transform the health of a nation founded on 3 principles: that it meet the healthcare needs of everybody, that it be free at the point of delivery, and that it be based on clinical need and not somebody's ability to pay or their privilege. These founding principles then were born out of a sense of community and connectedness, local people supporting their own communities through a sense of ownership and pride, those who needed the care and those who delivered the care, working together to deliver a healthier population. Now, in 1946, some people said that this was just not possible, that the financial cost of repaying the war effort was just too high, and there was no capacity to make such a radical change to the way that healthcare was delivered. Now, what we were doing before COVID came, I'd suggest to you, was not sustainable. We were delivering care in a way that cost more and more, for less and less. What we have shown, what we've seen, what we've witnessed is that it is possible for us to do the impossible, just like it was when they created the NHS. That the collective NHS community, the capacity, the capability within it, even when faced with something that appeared to be insurmountable as a challenge, was able to change, was able to make something different and make something better. The tanker has turned. It's up to us to decide where it's going next.
So that's the end of this first part of the session, and I want to thank all my dear friends and colleagues for having taken part and come on a slightly wacky journey with me, and I thank you for coming on my wacky journey too. But I do actually think there's a lot to listen to and a lot to take in that can influence how we in healthcare might want to move forward in the future. It is such an important area for us to think boldly and very seriously about, actually, because we need to move differently. Things have to change differently and we need to bring about that change. So how could we in healthcare bring about change in small ways and larger ways, influencing policy, influencing organisations, influencing individuals? So what we'd like you to do now is to move out into your breakout groups. Now this will happen automatically to you, I'm promised, by Caroline Easton, who's organising the conference. And you will then have the opportunity for about 15 minutes to, and it depends how you get on. If it's all done in 5, that's fine. Or if you need more time, you can have more time. But about 15 minutes to introduce yourself to each other, talk about what you've heard, see if there's things that you think could influence and help your organisation and your policies in your countries that could make a change. And it might be just one thing you thought, oh yeah, that's interesting. Or there might be a whole load. When I listen to it, there's so many different things I think we could do to influence change in the UK. But we need to take small steps, but bold steps, if we're going to do this. So get together in your groups. If one of you could be the writer, the script writer, and place in the room your comments at the end, then after about 15 minutes, we will come back together again, and Thomas Kitchen and I will try and collate what you've written into some kind of theme or themes that could help you then when you move tomorrow on Wednesday into the session about post-COVID and changes that need to happen post-COVID. So I hope that makes sense. We're going to put up a slide explaining exactly how it works and what you need to do and don't do when you move into the breakout groups. And I will see you later. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Debbie, for putting that together, and to everybody that was in it. In a moment, then, we're going to split out into those breakout rooms. And questions in the chat there from Michael and from Jilly, you know, what comes next? And that's exactly what we want to talk about. Take a moment to share some ideas and some thoughts, to be bold, to look at our practice and our environments, our individual places, our workforces, our strategies. What is it that we can do that we felt was impossible that can be possible? We've put together a short document that we hope you'll find useful, just as a sort of a prompt or an aid memoir. And if we can just share that now. So just at the top of your screen, there's a little download, as it were, arrow. So if you won't be able to see this in your breakout room, so if you want a copy, then just press the download button, and then it will open up on your screen, and then you can have it to keep, as it were. Finally, just remember, as we've said, to assign a scribe, if that's all right. And then put your summaries of some of the ideas that you've come up with in the chat as you go through. So thanks very much, and let's move into our rooms.
Okay, so are you all guys back in the room yet?
I think everybody's back in.
Yeah. Is everybody back in? Yeah, they are. Is that right, Kim? I'm trying to work out. Okay, cool. So listen, I think everybody's back. I do hope so, and your messages are coming through, which are fabulous. And thank you. And Thomas and I are just kind of aware of time, and you know, even though it took us a while to put this together, and we've been talking about these ideas, it was great to do it, wasn't it, Thomas? And try and help stimulate what we can see as some really interesting things coming through. So what Thomas and I thought we'd do is put all these together and then send them to you. So some themes together. But Tom and you and I were chatting, and we kind of came up with some themes ourselves, didn't we? Like, you know, some of the things that came to me, that it's all about connections. You know, we mustn't forget connections, and, you know, we need to think big, we need to think small, but we don't need to do what we normally do. We need to think beyond that. Don't you think, Thomas? Yeah. And rewild our lives. I think that's a great idea.
Rewilding and taking a step back. Taking a step back and appreciating each of the components for itself, and recognizing how they all add up to something bigger. I've seen interconnectedness and connections, or a lack of connection, actually, as a negative thing, sort of coming up over and over again in this chat stream as it's come through. So yeah, we'll collate those together and
Yeah.
send them back to the people who've joined the session.
So I just hope that it has stimulated you to think what we can do differently. I can see them all coming through now, which is just fantastic. And I think we need to harness this. You know, I think, you know, having been on the academic panel and read all the wonderful abstracts we've had, in their individual things, they're fab. But what we've got to do now is bring it all together. We've got, you know, how do we influence those people that are unheard? How do we get them to tell us what we need to do? Let's not make assumptions, okay? So if you want to keep chatting, Thomas and I will hang around for another 10 minutes or so. There's the carousel. You can go and join the networking carousel, because you obviously all enjoy talking to each other and you can see each other again. Or you could go do some yoga with my great yoga teacher, or take a walk on the wild side. You know, do whatever which will help stimulate your thinking and enjoy and build for the session tomorrow. So thank you for coming and listening to us, Thomas. And thank you to Thomas. Thomas, you finished because you're such a great speaker.
No. Well, thanks, Debbie, and thank you to everybody for putting more things in this chat. Please keep them coming in if there's more things you want to post, because we'd love to put them together. And as I say, we'll make sure they get back to you. Thank you to you, Debbie, and thank you to Ben for the video and producing that for us. And yeah, let's see what better things we can create and what's next.
Yeah, and we'll just hang around in case anybody does want to have a chat. We're very happy to. So enjoy the rest of your day, whatever time it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody.